So, yeah, pregame show. I continue to read the Lone Wolf and Cub manga. Again, I'm very happy to have found a local trove of the 1987 translation and localization of this through by First Publishing. This is very cool, and a lot of the covers. This is neat. Certainly these are the 70s. This is the 70s manga. So it's all the illustrations are Kojima Goseki, but the covers are actually drawn by Frank Miller, who writes all the introductions. So yeah, it's interesting, the cover art, and I wonder if this is. I can think of two possible explanations for this. One, there was not adequate cover art for the original material. Maybe it was published as part of a serial and didn't have its own distinct cover. The other explanation I can think of is something that shows up in the introductions. This is certainly well before anime and manga came to be a sort of a dominant cross-cultural phenomenon between American audiences and Japanese creators. So I wonder if part of having an American style illustration on the cover was in part to draw people in who might be looking for that sort of like darker comic book style that that Miller was such a good example of. But yeah, these are immensely entertaining, very well plotted. It's really cool that each one of them is a story unto itself, which I appreciate. Having, of course, worked on a comic book game of Iron Man, and kind of like knowing how those stories link up, and there's like a sort of like a long multi-issue story that unfolds that you kind of have to wait the next one to see how that pans out. It is refreshing to have that alternative approach of each issue being functionally a one-shot, and I like that. Other than that, I jumped into reading Principia Discordia, which I mentioned during a prior stream. This is an absurdist metaphysical book written around 1968. Apparently it was a favorite of the authors of the Illuminati trilogy, which was often recommended to me in college, and which I never actually read. But I know enough people who liked it that I kind of know what the gist of it is, and apparently quotations from Principia Discordia show up as leading quotes in many of those chapters. And this is very entertaining. And I'll share with you some of my favorite selections of it so far, and it is telling. I mean, it's very much a zine style metaphysics. There's barely any attribution. You have no idea who wrote what. It really feels like it could come in a series of like newsprint formatted one sheets, and it's a lot of fun, and I'm about halfway through it. It's kind of a quick read, but here are some of my favorites from it so far. Here we go. So Eris is the goddess of discord, and being Principia Discordia, that of course makes her a fine choice to be a leading face of it. So yeah, is Eris true? Everything is true. Even false things are true. How can that be? I don't know, man. I didn't do it. And it is that honestly, having read so much philosophy and theology, and having been involved in so many metaphysics where there's a rational expectation, even in deconstruction with Derrida, there's explication, right? There's talking more about whatever you're talking about, or as he would say, you're not talking about, and it's kind of fun just to see a harsh cutoff, just cauterize that right there. And why do you deal with so many negatives to dissolve them? Will you develop that point? No. Which is fun for the cheek, but also it is clever because it, of course, terminates with a negative. So that's one. Presumably, the negative is the action that is being asked to explain. So it's like the level of discourse is on explanation, but the action in discourse is to terminate it. Anyway, I think it's very neat. Let's see, and there are these bizarre, and I cannot claim to follow this very well. There are these different degrees of ideals. This one is the House of the Rising Collapse. Again, the contradiction, the paradox, the absurdity, which I actually dig. I think there's actually a lot of value in that sort of mystic cancellation of a thought. For the encouragement of liberation of freedom, and or the discouragement of the immanentizing of the eschaton. I have no idea what that means, but these are presumably opposites. The one that interests me is that, so wisdom and insanity, integrity and arrogance, I can see how those are opposites, but the one that really caught my eye was beauty and outrage. That those are opposite states. That's fascinating. Kind of don't know what to make about that. Love and bombast also. That's an unexpected sort of balancing act there. Laughter and bullshit, which is that also makes a little more sense to me. Laughter being something genuine, bullshit being not necessarily a nonsense argument, but a certain disingenuous pose, kind of a pretense. So those are neat. POEE, pronounced POEE, is an acronym for the Paratheo Anametamystichood of Eris Esoteric. The first part can be taken to mean equivalent deity, reversity beyond mystique. We are not really esoteric. It's just that nobody pays much attention to us. It's the polysyllabic wielding, kind of like stirring in place of the arguments and stuff like that. That's kind of fun in its own right, but it's not really a selling point. It's these little moments of commentary and personality, which is really what's selling this. This makes me think of something that Kilgore Trout would have written. And if I read this as though it were authored by Kilgore Trout, it immediately fits within my frame of reference, and I understand it completely. Which, of course, it wasn't, but I think that it would also be fine under the pretense of being written by somebody who doesn't exist. Evidence of that being one of the ways of ordaining yourself in this organization, should you not wish to be part of it. And if you can kind of let that sink in. How to start a POEE cabal without messing around with a polyfather. Polyfather being the multifaceted patriarch that runs this group. If you can't find the polyfather, or having found him don't want anything to do with him, you are still authorized to form your own POEE cabal. And to do priestly things using the Principia Discordia as a guide. Your official rank will be POEE Chaplain for the Legion of Dynamic Discord, which is exactly the same as a POEE Priest, except that you don't have an ordination certificate. The words you are reading now are your ordination. This is very clever. This is very clever and very fun, and I dig it. Basically, there is no distinction among ranks except one person has a piece of paper, and as long as you want to, you are. It's just undermining a great deal of sort of the pomp and self-perception of religion. What the hell are you doing? Man, put this cat in a closed room and she spazzes out. But yeah, so that's what I've been reading, and I'm looking forward to probably can finish that in like an hour. It's a really breezy read. But that in mind, we are off in Elden Ring land.